Hi everyone, I'm John, your host today on Route to Scale, a short podcast featuring the founders and operators building the future of e commerce, fulfillment, and modern delivery. In this segment, we're going to be focusing on Africa, and today I'm so honored to have Loyiso on this call from Mapha, looking to disrupt delivery and digital services for townships across South Africa. Loyiso, it's such an honor to have you today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, John. It's a pleasure being on your podcast as well. And thanks to the listeners for tuning in as well.
No, really appreciate it. So I'm just gonna start with the simple questions just to get us a little bit warmed up, right? And I'm just so excited about it. So what led you to start Mapha, right? From this idea to build it into a logistics platform it is today.
Well, a pretty interesting one because one thing that we have a lot this side in Southern Africa, specifically South Africa, is that we actually follow trends from the West quite a bit. So we usually have this thing of the trends happening in the West follow up the side in around 10 years, 5 to 10 years. So one of the biggest thing was fractured supply chains and what we call the last mile. Um, the last mile had been quite a big issue based on our supply chains and our infrastructure that we had, specifically for what we would call the divide in society, as we have our upper echelon areas, our urban areas, and then we've got our township areas and rural areas, where the majority of the population actually resides in, around 85% of the population per se. So when we shipped in those type of businesses, such as your Uber Eats and your delivery type of businesses, it was only catering for the minority that lives within the space where the infrastructure is sound. Now, that marginalized or left out majority of the population. Um, so coming from that side of the world as a background, um, I decided to take on the task to develop a solution to bring these goods and services as well as technology to allow access and to democratize that for a majority of South Africans as well.
Wow, that's so awesome and amazing. One thing that I really noticed doing a little bit of our research and speaking with you is you have this huge emphasis on making delivery work in townships, right? Can you explain to me why townships and what is operationally difficult, about this area of townships that you're particularly trying to tackle?
Yes, I think what I mentioned is the the problem is the disparity in income in South Africa. We've got one of the largest what the economists call Gini coefficients,
Mm,
which is the inequality from an income perspective, um, and where we divided between our rural areas, the city, and then the townships per se, which are in close proximity. Now, the biggest issue was the breadbasket or the cost of the breadbasket. Individuals in those regions are the biggest buyers in terms of volume and size um, from a economic level. However, in terms of the basket size, in terms of how much they can afford, it's quite low. So they usually live hand to mouth
right,
or live on a weekly wage cycle,
right.
and most of the money that the families have goes to transportation and getting to work. So the added value of these services of deliveries and supply chain was not something that was introduced to them based on the fact that no one could manufacture or could innovate through the unit economics until now.
Right, right.
Yes.
Wow, I can see why, on your LinkedIn, I remember I read that you're working to build the infrastructure of trust, for these frontier markets, right? So that's really awesome in terms of what you're thinking about. So let's now talk about practical logistical problems, right? And I'm just so curious as to how you went about and innovated and solved some of these issues. So we know that a lot of these townships and specific areas may not be clearly mapped, right, or addressed that well. How do you actually find a customer's door? How do you create those routes as reliably as possible from your standpoint?
Yes. So mapping is one of the big issues. Based on these are high dense areas with high population, but within a small square mile or small square kilometer. So we got multiple individuals living within a dense area and multiple housing units, specifically in those areas as well. So traditionally, the mapping that occurs from, I would say, your Foursquares, your Google Maps, and all other mapping technologies. Um, look at it geographically, but don't look at it through the number of people within the particular
Hmm.
square meter, square kilometer.
Hmm.
Now, this became a bit of an issue because of addresses, and we know that the telematics or the delivery coordinates that are required for the platforms um, utilize the maps for geographical data. However, what we utilized was um, metadata and our ordering information. So customers could be in the same in and around the radius of the same um, coordinate. However, they've got separate dwellings within the yard.
S-
So what
s-
we would do is we build up a database of the customers that we've already served and the pins, the direct pins as to where they are and the notes as to which whether they live in the same unit or separate dwellings. And the mining of that data allowed us to get to and once we had it at scale, it allowed us to map out regions from a customer facing view. And
Wow.
this allowed us for uh,
Wow.
easier optimization of deliveries as well as the census data that also um, can assist for other issues such as government counting and any other issues that individuals that require that data can use.
Wow. Wow. That's so awesome. So, you know, when you one of the key things I also noticed about Mapha is that you run a mixed fleet, right? When I was doing a bit of research, you run a fleet across motorcycles, even bicycles, vans, and cars, right? That's so amazing, awesome. How does that change, the way you think about routing and dispatching, across those different kinds of fleets?
Um, so the last mile is based on pure unit economics if you're going to survive in this specific industry. What I mean by that is optimizing for the cargo that you're delivering is essential. Um, because you don't want to be sending a letter in a truck, for example, as you're already dealing with the customer segment. Even though there are many in number, they're quite price sensitive. So you need to find a fine line between um, how much to charge for it to be affordable as well as convenient, but without taking the price out of the price range in which these individuals can afford. So we made sure that for specific items, because we do what we call matching. So we would match if a person is moving groceries, for example. Um, Usually, sometimes they can fit on what we call a top box in a motorbike.
Hmm.
But some people utilize the service for stocking up their stores. So that's
Hmm.
a higher cargo. So we would match that with what we call vans or mini trucks to ensure that we match the size of the actual good with the vehicle type that makes more sense from a fuel perspective. Um,
Ah.
and and once we can do that, it allows us to to perform what we call batching, so and scheduled deliveries, which bulks together deliveries that are going into a certain area, but on a time basis. So we don't do up and down or to and fro. We can just make one cleaner delivery with a bigger vehicle, which gets the items to the merchants at a lower cost because of economies of scale or because of bulking. So we ensure that we match the size of the item. If it's a letter, it goes into a smaller type of vehicle, like a bicycle.
Hmm.
Hot food, it will go in a motorbike for timely speed and sometimes it's hot food. So to also keep temperature. But it's highly essential to ensure that you price accordingly because you have only a small amount of leeway before you can price your consumer out of the market.
Right, right. And and that sounds like so awesome, but it also sounds, as we always know, logistics businesses can be complicated really quickly, really, really fast, right? Um, if you were to state what is one problem on the logistics level that you're looking to try and improve on the unit economics level, right? That will then you feel make the biggest difference for your company.
I think the the biggest issue regarding logistics, specifically in, 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 in Africa, is 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 mapping and data. Um, uh, because it's all about time and optimizing for the good that you're delivering. And
Right.
the best way to optimize for that is to ensure that you're moving. goods for multiple customers in the same region at, at similar times, but in one transit. This just prevents you from to and fro or going up and down cost from a fuel perspective.
Right.
So we stress on our data, and our data actually reveals quite a bit regarding the basket sizes for certain areas, the times in which the demand influxes, so we can have enough vehicles in play. Um, so our data department and having a background in actual science and banking is what we rely on quite a bit because that's where the modeling is done and it gives us the predictive analytics
Wow.
to ensure that we save on cost of trips by bulking and
Wow.
also um, route optimization in terms of which routes to take that can get us to the customers on time as well as the average waiting time for customers to ensure that we don't get to the destination and wait because that costs money for the drivers at the end of the day, which is a cost to the business.
Right, right. So you mentioned that one of your, biggest issues is like that mapping data, right? Can you give me an example of like, can you give me an example of when an issue about that like kind of occurred? Like, I don't know, let's just say like maybe your drivers had to go back and forth and that was a pain. And then how did you then go about and solve that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's particularly important because what happens in many cases is the fact that when a customer utilizes the platform and wants a delivery, they would usually just use a pin, um,
Mm,
which the Google does the nearby search in terms of the location, in terms of a radius from the device. Now that leaves you the radius, which could be multiple places within the same area. So one thing about the township, specifically from a mapping perspective and the rural areas, is that we rely heavily on outdoor signals. So, for example, when I would say landmarks. So one of the landmark features was the best because what it does to the driver is it positions the consumer if they can't really get the address um, from the satellite systems. They utilize landmarks. Uh, where about when the driver has arrived by the landmark, which you can see on the platform, they are able to then show themselves, and then the driver. It's like walking to your apartment door or your gate
so,
if you're in the
oh,
suburbs.
so can
But
I just check?
the
You solved this problem by getting the customer to actually meet the driver at a landmark rather than at their address. Is that correct?
Yes, and then this
Oh, that's
landmark
so
is
smart. That's so smart.
yeah,
Wow.
and this landmark is verified by us. So it's
Ah,
we verify trusted landmarks marks in areas where safety and all of those zones are. And then
wow.
since the area is dense in nature, um, we would say go to the the yellow merchant, mom and pop shop, for example.
Right.
So that's a decentralized distribution zone for us. And the mom and pop
Oh,
shops, in a lot of the cases, are already on our platform.
oh, wow, wow,
So,
wow.
so
That's so
we also
awesome.
utilize them as a trusted a Mappa point
Wow, wow, wow. And just to
to
check,
pick up.
just to understand, how many of these deliveries are you doing on a maybe daily or weekly basis?
Yeah, so we work within we work within on a on a weekly basis. We currently push around in excess of around 500
Mm-hmm,
um, business deliveries.
mm-hmm.
Um, and then the business to consumer deliveries, because we allow the businesses that we stock up for to utilize their own fleet, or they can utilize our fleet for the last mile as well.
Mm.
Um, yeah, that's the thousands.
Wow, wow. Thousands on a weekly basis.
Yes,
Wow,
yes,
wow. So it's like you have like bigger business deliveries that you support, but then you also have
yes.
support the businesses to then deliver from the business to the last mile. Is that correct?
Exactly,
Wow,
exactly. Because
wow.
the biggest issue for the businesses within the areas is they struggle to get their goods from the wholesaler, so
Right,
they need to stock up
right,
their shelves, and in those cases,
right,
that's where the service is offered to them, and then our our technology also allows them to have a platform where they can accept online payments, and
right.
also they could also view their just an online store as
Wow,
well. Yeah,
wow, wow. That's so
yeah,
awesome.
just to digitize them. Yeah.
That's so awesome. So, so, I think, we're just here on the last couple of questions, right? Just so for us to know more. So, you're obviously looking to continue to grow Mapha, right? What does the next stage of growth look like for your company, right? Is it like more cities, more categories, or how are you thinking about expansion?
Um, so expansion is quite interesting.
Mm,
And from a startup perspective, one thing I've always believed in is you have to watch your unit economics because that's what makes you. That's ultimately whether your product is profitable or not.
right, of
Um,
course.
so um, one of the biggest things to look for to optimize that is distribution.
Mm,
So um, we noted that yes, we've got to expand, we decentralize our distribution, allowing individuals within the multiple township areas, the areas that we operate in, to also support with their own vehicles and have gigs
mm,
for gig work. However, we did realize that our approach for utilizing our merchant network, um, which we already have as distribution points, pickup points, was quite big. So we're trying to expand that now. Those zones that I spoke to you about being landmarks. So to have those landmarks in every city and every township, specifically in sub-Saharan Africa,
wow.
which opens the stream for also other players to deliver within the regions that they don't deliver, but we will distribute from our landmarks.
I see.
As well as yes, you can continue.
So you're trying to create like mini warehouses, mini distribution points to make it even more
Yes,
efficient. Is that correct?
yeah, yes,
Wow.
yeah. Decentralized mini distribution points, which are already part of our network. Um,
Wow.
and then also, um, one thing that we have noticed, which is a big one, is connecting from the cost of the merchants. So how
Oh,
that helps is that many of these merchants struggle with access to 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 trade credit based on the fact that their data is fractured or it's not seen in terms of their sales.
right.
So since we've got an eye on that, we mine and we analyze that data to be able to utilize it to avail a credit line to them. So once it's visible how many sales they make, they can actually utilize that credit to grow their business
Wow.
instead of having to recoup the money first and then go buy again. It allows them to expand. So yeah, the the, the, the lending for the good merchants, the ones that actually have activity, is our next phase as well.
Right.
And the embedded finance because we have sight of their data already.
Right. Right. That's so awesome. Just want to,
Alternative lending, yeah.
yeah. Wow. So you're gonna add in lots of powerful embedded finance into those distribution points. That's
Yes.
really, really awesome. Just some, just to double back again on the operational challenge, which just occurred to me that, and it was a really great point. You mentioned one of the biggest operational challenges was the mapping and then the routing to think about how you can batch more orders together, right? How are you thinking about improving some of those mapping issues that you currently face beyond what you're already doing?
I think um, we make it clear that focus is one of the biggest things that you have to have as when running a business.
Mm,
Focusing on what you do best and making sure you do that best,
mm,
and not shooting at too many targets.
mm,
The mapping is a structural issue that was well, we adopted from we had inequalities in our country and past regimes. So our basis was just to ensure that we want with every delivery that we create our own map for
mm,
internal purposes,
mm,
and then we layer that those nodes or the data for existing customers on existing maps providers like your Google Maps and your what words or your Foursquare. So what we decided on was to just use it as an internal tool.
mm.
Not into the mapping business because that's a whole different um, uh, that's a whole different use case with
Okay,
its own
right, right.
economics, which we didn't look to set, but obviously use trusted partners or third parties to do that. So to answer your question,
Mm,
um, we can't solve it physically, but we have our internal nodes that we layer on maps,
right, right,
right?
right.
Based on customer behavior. And then we then utilize that internal data plus third-party existing infrastructure
I
to make
see.
those decisions.
I
And then
see.
in terms of route, that's for the maps and routing. In
Mm,
terms of the delivery routes, um, we signal the hot areas
mm.
where obviously the theft and unsafe times by limiting the times where when we can deliver in those areas, or opting to not deliver in certain areas where they've got a historical high crime rate. But
Oh,
beyond that, that's the data analysis we put. So we rely heavily on our data analysis team um, uh, to inform, because as we said that it's all based on the data.
right, right. You know,
Yeah.
just to double down on it, we know that in, anything last mile or logistics, right? Time and optimization is really, really important, right? Time that you promise your customers, you're going to deliver your goods on time, and all these kinds of things, right? How do you currently, try your best to use whatever routing and data analysis you have to estimate some of those times and routes for your customers to understand? Is it all done through your app, or, tell me how you thought about that process?
Yeah. So currently the drivers have a different platform that they utilize.
Mm,
Um, so that it basically it's like recursive. So what it does is it collects all the data from different events that drivers have had in the area, and then it gives specific average waiting times, which hotspot zones they should watch out for. It gives them a target as well in terms of
ah,
what's their target time in the area, and then it gives them benefits based on their targets, their
oh,
target time. Um, if we say that on average in this area to go around a 5 kilometer radius, which has been done hundreds of times, we've got the average. We say that you are expected to be within this band, and this is what you get from a remuneration perspective. You keep to the time on you not on you as a driver, because it's incentive based.
wow.
So we get into, and also we don't we allow now and then uh, excuses on why the goods were late, but we do have a tracking element on a pattern. Yeah, so if the pattern shows that, then we take it up with the specific driver service provider for quality assurance. And then also, what we don't do is in certain times of the day, uh, in certain times of the day, we we batch, so we know that
Mm,
if customers um, decide on, I would rather prefer a batched delivery at a certain time. It affects their costs because they're batching. It
mm.
lowers their costs in one center, versus an on demand. If it's on demand, then um, the price goes higher because it has to be prioritized separately.
Right, right. And is this separate platform? Is it built by Mapha as well? So you have your own kind of online platform, but then you also have the app for the drivers. Is that correct?
Yes.
Wow, wow. That's so awesome. That's so awesome. All right, I think we're gonna start to wrap up over here. So I'm just gonna ask, the last question over here, which is probably I think the most important one, right? If you could give one advice, right, to any other entrepreneur or other operators that are looking to build successful last mile businesses in Africa and perhaps South Africa, right? What advice would you give them?
Um, I would really uh, give them two actually. Number one being that um, it's about time and optimization.
Hmm.
So your ability to collect data at scale and utilize that data, allow you to number one, get goods to the consumers on time, and also lower the price in terms of batching because you know your times. And then I think the biggest out of all is you need to find your unique distribution methodology.
Hmm.
If distribution looks like partnering with uh, individuals or with businesses that have distribution but are not even in your industry,
Hmm.
that's okay as well. However, what's important is finding distribution. As we spoke about, sometimes distribution can look differently. In our case, we utilize distribution, utilizing landmarks and existing mom and pop stores um, for decentralized revenue. In your case, it could be anything else, because getting as close as possible to the consumer is what will get you there on time.
Wow, wow. Thank you so much, Loiso, for your time and for your amazing insights. That was awesome. Everybody, this is Mapha. Watch out for them as they continue to revolutionize last mile deliveries and logistics. This is our podcast, Route to Scale. Thank you so much for joining us for today.